7 haunting videos of Nick Reiner before he murdered his parents. What if the warning signs were there all along, captured on camera for the world to see, but nobody recognized them until it was too late? Today, we're examining 7 disturbing videos that documented the gradual unraveling of a mind before it reached a breaking point that shocked Hollywood and left a family destroyed forever. After the arrest of Nick Reiner in connection with the deaths of his famous parents, filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle, internet sleuths began a chilling digital excavation. What they discovered wasn't just footage, it was a timeline of deterioration that had been hiding in plain sight. From promotional interviews to casual recordings, these videos transformed from innocent memories into haunting evidence of a tragedy that might have been prevented. The question isn't just what happened, but what we all missed while watching.
Number 1. The 2016 warning nobody took seriously. Let's start with a video that recently resurfaced, sending shockwaves through everyone who watched it. Filmed back in 2016, this wasn't some hidden footage discovered in a dark corner of the internet. It was publicly available, sitting online for nearly a decade, yet its true significance only became clear after the unthinkable occurred. The setting appears almost cinematic, the affluent streets of Brentwood with its manicured lawns and pristine sidewalks. The camera follows Nick as he wanders through this picture-perfect neighborhood, but his words paint an entirely different landscape. He speaks about collecting his troubled thoughts, describing a mental state that should have raised immediate red flags. The contrast is jarring, external perfection masking internal chaos. What makes this footage particularly unsettling is its documentary-style presentation. When prompted to introduce himself, Nick's response reveals a troubling detachment from his own identity. He speaks with a strange mixture of grandiosity and paranoia, suggesting someone whose sense of self has already begun to fragment. The way he references his recognition, his importance, hints at an ego dangerously inflating beyond reality's boundaries. But the most chilling moment comes when a neighborhood dog interrupts the filming. Nick's reaction isn't annoyance or humor, it's something far colder. His threat against the animal is delivered with such casual calm that it becomes exponentially more disturbing. There's no anger, no raised voice, just a flat, matter-of-fact statement of violent intent. This wasn't hyperbole or dark humor. Looking back now, it reads as evidence of eroding moral boundaries, a preview of a mind losing its grip on the value of life itself. The video also shows Nick with his sister, engaging in substance use while displaying what can only be described as hollow amusement. There are additional concerning elements visible in the footage that further paint a picture of someone spiraling. Then comes his own diagnosis, delivered without emotion or context, just a blunt admission that lands like a stone in water, creating ripples nobody knew how to interpret. Perhaps the most tragic irony is the timing. This footage was captured during the promotional campaign for Being Charlie, a film based on Nick's own battles with addiction. While the movie was being celebrated as a story of redemption and second chances, the real Nick was documenting his continued descent. The film promised hope. The reality suggested something far darker was brewing beneath the surface of recovery.
Number 2. 2 hours of normalcy after horror. Fast forward to the night everything changed. Security camera footage from a convenience store tells a story so ordinary it becomes extraordinary, given what we now know preceded it. The timestamp reads just hours after the alleged murders. Nick enters the frame wearing casual clothing, a distinctive jacket with colored stripes, jeans, sneakers, and a bright backpack slung over his shoulder. What's most striking is what's missing: any visible signs of distress, panic, or emotional turmoil. He navigates the store like any other late-night customer. He browses the refrigerated section, selecting a sports drink with the same care someone might take choosing their preferred flavor. He waits patiently in line, makes small talk during checkout, and handles the transaction with complete composure. The clerk who served him later reported that nothing seemed amiss. He appeared polite, normal, entirely unremarkable. After completing his purchase, Nick doesn't rush away. He crosses to the opposite side of the gas station and simply waits on a street corner, as if this were any other evening, as if his entire world hadn't just collapsed into horror. Then, approximately an hour later, the ordinary shatters. Multiple police vehicles converge on the location with lights blazing, transforming the mundane gas station into a crime scene. The arrest is swift and professional. Officers approach with weapons drawn, and Nick complies immediately. He raises his hands, follows commands, and shows no resistance. His vacant expression suggests someone who had already resigned himself to this moment, perhaps had been expecting it since leaving his parents' home. What haunts viewers most about this footage is the absolute normalcy of those in-between hours. There's no visible guilt, no breakdown, no moment where the mask slips. It's as if two completely separate realities existed simultaneously, the horrific act behind him and the calm, collected persona he presented to the world. This disconnect between action and reaction offers a disturbing window into a fractured psyche. Number 3. The interview that revealed everything. Now we travel back to 2016 again, to a promotional interview that would become forensically analyzed after the tragedy. This AOL Build series conversation, meant to promote Being Charlie, instead captured the painful gulf between a desperate father and an emotionally unreachable son. Rob Reiner sits beside his son with the posture and energy of someone trying to bridge an unbridgeable gap. Every word he speaks carries the weight of paternal love and barely concealed worry. He's animated, engaged, constantly glancing at Nick as if checking for connection, for any sign that his son is truly present. When Rob discusses Nick, his voice softens with unmistakable affection, calling him the person he loves most in the world. Nick, by stark contrast, exists in a completely different emotional dimension. His responses are clipped, monotone, and delivered without inflection or warmth. He rarely makes eye contact with anyone, not the interviewer, not the camera, and especially not his father. His gaze drifts to undefined points in the distance, as if focusing on something the rest of the room cannot see. When asked about their relationship during Nick's childhood, his answer is devastatingly brief. He acknowledges they weren't close, offering no elaboration, no anecdote, no emotional color. It's a statement that ends the conversation rather than inviting it, leaving an awkward silence that Rob attempts to fill with his own memories and hopes. The interview reveals Nick's staggering history of seeking treatment, 18 separate rehabilitation attempts. He discusses this extraordinary number without emotion, describing drug use not as pleasure, but as an escape from internal noise, from the pressure of expectations tied to his famous surname. There's no self-pity in his telling, but also no insight, no suggestion that he's processed any of these experiences into understanding. Rob, for his part, makes a confession that now reads as tragically prophetic. He admits to having trusted professionals and programs over his own parental instincts, essentially outsourcing his son's salvation to systems that may have done more harm than good. It's a vulnerable admission, but one that seems to bounce off Nick's impenetrable emotional armor. Perhaps most unsettling is when Nick discusses his experiences with homelessness. He recites the locations like reading from a grocery list: Maine, New Jersey, Texas, mentioning sleeping outside for extended periods without any trace of pain or trauma in his voice. These should be wrenching memories, but he presents them as dry facts, as if describing someone else's life entirely. The interview also captures Nick issuing what could be interpreted as warnings. He speaks about his capacity for extreme reactions when provoked, describing himself with terms that should have alarmed everyone listening. Yet in the moment, these admissions were likely dismissed as edgy honesty or the dark humor of someone who'd survived the unsurvivable. Only later would these statements be recontextualized as red flags flapping violently in a wind nobody acknowledged.
Number 4. The body language that screamed silence. Another interview from that same promotional period offers an even more detailed study of nonverbal communication and emotional absence. From the opening seconds, Nick's physical presentation tells a story his words refuse to speak. His posture throughout is rigid, defensive. Arms remain either crossed tightly across his chest or resting limply in his lap, creating a physical barrier between himself and everyone else. There's no natural movement, no relaxed shifting, no gestures to emphasize points. He's locked himself down, turning his own body into a fortress. His facial expression remains remarkably static. There's no animation, no reaction to questions, no social mirroring of the interviewer's energy. It's as if he's not just emotionally distant, but physically removed from the interaction, participating only because he must, not because any part of him wants to engage. When asked directly about the challenge of working on such a personal film with his father, Nick's response is chillingly bland. He describes it as not particularly difficult, even pleasant, delivering these words with all the enthusiasm of someone reading terms and conditions. There's no acknowledgement of the obvious emotional complexity such a situation would create. Either he genuinely felt nothing, or he'd become so adept at suppressing feeling that the performance had become permanent. Meanwhile, Rob Reiner continues his pattern of painful honesty. He expresses deep regret about his approach to Nick's eviction, admitting he should have listened more and directed less. He acknowledges that his son understood his own needs better than any expert could. These are the words of a father who's realized, perhaps too late, that authority and love are not the same thing. Yet Nick offers no acknowledgement of this vulnerability, no forgiveness, no connection, just the same distant monotone confirming his experience wasn't difficult. For him, their father-son relationship appears purely transactional. Clear boundaries, defined roles, no messy emotions to navigate. Rob tries repeatedly to find common ground, praising Nick's authenticity and contribution to the film. He uses phrases loaded with paternal affection, calling Nick the heart and soul of the project, admitting that seeing his son on screen never stops being his son first, actor second. Each loving statement seems to hit an invisible wall, absorbed into Nick's emotional void without creating any ripple of response. Nick's only genuine engagement comes through dark humor, jokes about rehabilitation that cut too close to the truth, sarcastic observations that serve more as shields than bridges. It's laughter designed to create distance, to deflect any attempt at genuine connection. He's turned cynicism into his native language, the only way he knows to communicate without actually revealing anything. The camera captures micro-moments that become more significant in retrospect. Restless hands, despite his overall stillness. Eyes that occasionally flicker with something unreadable before going blank again. And smiles that appear and disappear so quickly they seem like technical glitches rather than genuine expressions. These are the physical manifestations of internal chaos being forcibly contained. Number 5. 3 words in the courtroom. Now we arrive at December 17, 2025, and a courtroom in Los Angeles where a very different version of Nick Reiner appears for the first time since his arrest. This hearing, initially scheduled for the previous day but delayed due to health concerns, would offer the public its first glimpse of Nick facing the consequences of his alleged actions. He enters wearing a thick anti-suicide smock in institutional blue, with no shirt underneath, a visual reminder of the authorities' concerns about his mental state. His hands and feet are restrained, movements limited as he's guided to a seat behind protective glass in the defendant's section. Throughout the proceedings, Nick's demeanor is unnervingly static. He sits slightly hunched, face forward, barely acknowledging the room full of people gathered to witness his arraignment. His blinking is infrequent,
his expression frozen in what might be described as nothing, not sadness, not defiance, not fear, just an emptiness that's somehow more disturbing than any emotional display would be. As the charges are formally read, 2 counts of first-degree murder, Nick shows no reaction, no intake of breath, no tightening of jaw, no subtle shift in posture. He could be hearing a weather report for how much he responds. This isn't the calm of someone at peace, it's the stillness of someone who's vacated their own emotional premises. The judge asks if he understands his rights and agrees to waive his right to a speedy trial. Nick speaks for the first and only time. "Yes, Your Honor." 3 words, delivered in complete monotone, without emphasis or inflection. Then silence returns, absolute and total, as if those 3 words exhausted his capacity for communication. No plea is entered. The trial is postponed to January 7, 2026. Bail is denied. Nick will remain in custody, monitored continuously for his own safety and that of others. His defense attorney is Alan Jackson, a high-profile lawyer whose previous clients include some of Hollywood's most controversial figures. Jackson approaches the case with visible caution, emphasizing its complexity and requesting the public withhold judgment pending investigation. What emerges from legal documents is information that recontextualizes everything we've seen. Nick had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and was receiving psychiatric treatment in the period leading up to the tragedy. More significantly, his medication had been adjusted in the final weeks before the incident. According to sources close to the family, these changes had destabilizing effects, making his mental state increasingly difficult to manage. This revelation adds another layer to our understanding of the warning signs. The emotional flatness, the detachment, the vacant stares, these weren't just personality traits or the residue of addiction. They may have been symptoms of a serious mental illness that was being treated, but perhaps not adequately controlled. Number 6. Love as a cage. In another revealing piece of footage, Nick discusses his rehabilitation experiences with a tone that suggests resignation rather than recovery. His perspective on treatment is illuminating and deeply troubling. He frames it not as the salvation he sought, but as something imposed upon him by parents whose love became indistinguishable from control. He acknowledges believing his parents loved him, recognizing their constant presence in his life. But this acknowledgement comes with a significant caveat that love, as he experienced it, functioned as a cage. Their concern, their surveillance, their involvement in every aspect of his recovery, it all added up to suffocation rather than support. Nick speaks particularly about how this dynamic affected his creativity. Music, for him, wasn't a hobby or even a passion. It was described as a survival instinct, as essential as breathing. Yet he felt his parents' anxieties and doubts suppressed this outlet, as if they couldn't trust him to express himself without it leading back to destruction. For someone who needed creativity to process trauma and pain, this restriction may have cut off his most important coping mechanism. The central wound Nick describes is a lack of trust. Not love, there was plenty of that, but trust in his capacity to manage his own life, to make his own mistakes, to find his own way forward. Their well-intentioned protectiveness communicated something he couldn't unhear, that he was fundamentally incapable, someone who would always need external control to prevent self-destruction. In what might be the most psychologically complex moment, Nick describes the guilt that accompanied every relapse. He'd use drugs and immediately be flooded with shame, not primarily because he'd harmed himself, but because he'd disappointed his parents. He imagined them thinking about him, worrying about him, and that image intensified his anguish rather than preventing his behavior. This creates a cruel paradox. The love that was meant to save him became part of what tormented him. Every use became not just a physical and psychological act, but a betrayal of people who cared. The rope they threw him to pull him from drowning had somehow become wrapped around his neck. Nick says explicitly what he wants: peace. Not redemption, not forgiveness, just peace. An end to the constant internal and external warfare that characterized his existence. It's a heartbreaking admission that suggests someone who'd been fighting so long he couldn't remember what it felt like not to be at war.
Number 7. The family friend who saw nothing wrong. Our final piece of evidence comes from someone who had a front-row seat to the Reiner family dynamics just days before everything fell apart. Barry, a close family friend, stayed at Rob and Michelle Reiner's home for 5 days while in town for a film premiere. His testimony is significant precisely because of what he didn't see. According to Barry, Nick appeared completely normal during this period. He was present, engaged, sober, and participating fully in family life. They shared meals, traditional family dinners, in what Barry emphasizes was an atmosphere of genuine warmth and affection. Nick wasn't isolated or withdrawn. He was there, contributing to conversations, interacting with everyone naturally. Barry watched Nick do ordinary things: play tennis, shoot basketball, and handle household chores like taking out trash and washing dishes. They watched television together as a family. There were no concerning incidents, no moments where Barry felt worried about Nick's stability or safety. From every observable angle, this was a functional, loving family unit. What troubles Barry most in hindsight isn't the absence of love, it's that there was so much of it, yet it somehow wasn't enough, or wasn't the right kind. He's careful to note he's not judging, that the love he witnessed was authentic, not performed. Rob and Michelle had never abandoned their son, even through his most difficult years. They'd invested not just money, but emotional energy, hope, an unwavering commitment into his recovery. They'd provided access to elite treatment programs, the best professionals, every resource wealth could buy. They believed, as parents must believe, that this time would be different, that eventually one of these interventions would be the one that finally worked. Yet from this foundation of undeniable love and unlimited support emerged an act of incomprehensible violence. Barry emphasizes that Rob Reiner was full of love. It wasn't lacking, it wasn't conditional, it was simply insufficient to prevent what was coming. The tragedy lies in that insufficiency, in the recognition that sometimes love, no matter how deep or genuine, cannot reach someone who's drowning in their own darkness. Those peaceful days Barry witnessed, the meals, the television watching, the mundane rhythms of family life, now feel like the calm before a catastrophe nobody saw approaching. Everything appeared normal because perhaps the danger had become so integrated into the family system that it no longer registered as abnormal. The warning signs had become the wallpaper. Looking back across these 7 videos, a pattern emerges that's as clear as it is tragic. Not explosive rage or obvious instability, but something far more insidious, a gradual emotional withdrawal, a progressive disconnection from feeling that manifested in flat affects, distant gazes, and words that described trauma without accessing any of its emotional weight. The warning signs were there, the casual threats of violence delivered without emotion, the admission of severe mental health issues stated as blandly as announcing the weather, the physical language of someone locked in defensive postures, the interviews where a son and father occupied the same space but seemed to exist in different dimensions of reality. But here's the terrible truth. Warning signs are only valuable if someone knows how to read them and has the power to intervene effectively. The Reiner family was not lacking in love, resources, or professional help. They had access to everything our society suggests should be able to save someone, yet it wasn't enough.
This case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about mental health, about the limits of love, and about whether our systems for helping people in crisis are actually equipped to prevent these tragedies or simply document them in hindsight. What do you think? Looking at this timeline of deterioration, which sign seems most significant to you? Was it the emotional flatness, the threats brushed off as dark humor, the admission of mental illness that seemed to generate no adequate response? More importantly, what could have been different? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. These discussions matter. Learning to recognize these patterns might help prevent another family from experiencing this kind of devastating loss. If you want to continue exploring the psychology behind cases like this, understanding what happens when mental health systems fail and families are left navigating impossible situations, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on. We're committed to examining these difficult topics with the depth and sensitivity they deserve. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the loudest warnings are delivered in silence.